Well, it's Thursday, and that means it's Tech Talk time. On today's agenda is the Cyber Intelligence Sharing Protection Act. It's better known as CISPA. We talk about it a lot here on RT. Now, just today, the bill passed through the House of Representatives 288 to 127. It is now on its way to the Senate. CISPA is causing a bitter divide in both the Capitol Hill as well as in Silicon Valley. Computer giants like IBM and Intel have both lobbied very hard in support of the bill. Meanwhile, Mozilla, Reddit, and advocacy groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation have voiced concerns over privacy rights. And even the president is weighing in. In a letter to Congress, the White House threatened to veto the bill in its current form. So to talk more about this tangled web is Sharon Bradford Franklin. She's a senior counsel at the Constitution Project, and she joins me now. Hey there. So I use the internet every day for work, for play, for everything. I'm sure you do. Most Americans do. How does CISPA change the way that I use the web or should use the web?
Well, the problem is that the bill that was passed today by the House does not include adequate safeguards to prevent private companies from sharing your personal information with the government. And the basic approach of the bill is to promote information sharing between private sector and the government. And the basic concept of that is fine as long as we do have robust safeguards built into the bill. And unfortunately, we did not get that with CISPA.
Now, let me ask you this. This bill in its current form says that it wants private companies, as you said, it promotes cooperation. It asks private companies to share their information, but it does not force them. What does that mean?
Well, that's correct. It is, quote, voluntary for companies to send information to the government, but it creates a huge incentive system because it provides broad-scale immunity from liability when companies do share that information with the federal government. And in fact, the breadth of the immunity provisions is another key problem with CISPA, because companies now, if they act in good faith, are immune for their information sharing, even if they engage in some behaviors that may be reckless or without any kind of reasonable planning involved.
Well, let's talk about that liability. Let's talk about that. What does that encompass? What exactly can these companies get away with, and how will it affect us and how we use the internet?
Well, the way the bill is structured, it poses all of the requirements on the government once it receives the information to protect our rights. And that is really troubling because we do want to make sure that companies have to play a role here in avoiding sending in your personal information to the government. The breadth of the immunity includes protection for any decisions made based on cybersecurity purposes. And that's a very broad term. It can encompass a whole lot of activity, including, as I mentioned, some that may be reckless if they perceive there's a cyber attack and they want to take action based on that.
Now, as I understand CISPA, it essentially overrides a lot of the current laws that we have intact, including the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, for instance. Considering how those laws, a lot of those laws haven't actually been updated since the 80s, is this a way to kind of shortcut and get around actually updating those laws by just passing CISPA?
No, I wouldn't say that, and we still do have important efforts to try and amend those laws. The concern where the structure of the bill says notwithstanding any other law is that it trumps any existing privacy protections and safeguards in that regard that are already in place. And that's why we want to make sure that the provisions within the bill are sufficiently robust. One key problem, of course, is it does not have a provision that we had hoped for, an amendment that would require companies to make reasonable efforts to strip out information that could be used to identify a specific person unrelated to the cyber threat. And companies have testified before Congress that this is something they can do.
And Sharon, I have to ask you about another thing that kind of sparked my interest, and that is that this bill actually allows for the critics of the bill are actually asking for the bill to be able to allow for this information to first go to some kind of civilian organization like the Department of Homeland Security before it's dispersed to other agencies like the NSA, for instance. So from your perspective, what does that do? What will that help when this information is going out in general?
Well, the provision you just mentioned, that's actually one good thing that did happen. Very last minute, we got an amendment that was introduced on the floor. It was not one that was originally passed through by the that does help on this problem of maintaining civilian control. Under that new provision, if companies want to come under the liability protection, the immunity protections, they can only give the information directly to either part of the Department of Homeland Security or, if it relates to a crime, to the Department of Justice.
And how will that protect us even more? Because it essentially means that more people have our information, essentially.
Well, it helps protect us because it maintains a civilian agency at the hub as the one that receives any information coming from our private civilian networks in peacetime. So that is a big improvement, and that was a key concern for us. Now, of course, the bill does require that the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice then set up rules to pass through information in real time to other agencies, including, of course, the NSA. But they will have to do that with policies and procedures in place that hopefully, at least through automated ways, can help minimize the personal information that is passed through to those other agencies.
So more regulation. And we have a little bit of time left. I have to ask you about the money, the lobbying efforts that are actually going into this kind of thing. Now, I know on Monday, IBM sent over 200 executives to the D.C. in order to lobby for this bill. And as a result, 36 new co-sponsors, we can't say if those two are exactly correlated, but 36 new co-sponsors actually joined CISPA. So does this say anything about outside interests playing a role on Capitol Hill?
Well, that's a good question. There certainly is some indication of that. There also, I do have to give some credit to the bill's sponsors for making some of these improvements, this one that we just discussed about civilian control being an important one. But of course, it didn't get far enough, and we still need to have much more robust safeguards for privacy rights, and hopefully that will come through the Senate if this bill does continue.
Sharon Bradford Franklin, Senior Counsel at the Constitution Project, thank you so much for weighing in on this.
Thank you very much.